Initially, puzzle piece writers represent a family that, despite being separated, remains connected, and says that this is their story. Seika Academy is a school where talented students have the opportunity to cultivate their skills. And for those who aspire to performing arts, sports, or advanced classes, they have a privilege, as the education offered at that school is exceptional. Meanwhile, Prota gets a shake in boxing class and thinks he has just transferred to that school. His name is Ayase. However, he is belittled by his opponent, who asks him if he is really Yu Ayase's son, while the audience watches snobbishly and wonders if he is really related to that famous actress, and they even say that he also did badly in the advanced class test. With that, Prota begins to think that yes, his mother tends to be a superstar, an actress known worldwide for her beauty and for doing her own dangerous scenes. And in her school days, she was so brilliant that she graduated as the best in the school. Her opponent tells him to take it seriously, because the three royalties of the school are watching him and want to see how good he is. But this irritates the boy, and he goes all out saying that he has never played any sport and that he is not his mother. At this moment, everyone is surprised, but the boy just distributes cute blows that captivate his opponent until he gets a hang-up, and everyone concludes that he is a total failure. But the boy doesn't let himself get down, because at 17 years old he is already used to people expecting the son of a prodigy to also be a prodigy. And strangely, he gets up and makes a pose that is very not straight, saying the more mediocre you are, the more obsessed with talent you become, which leaves his opponent surprised. After all, he has the pose of an elite actress. However, the boy is just a wreck and has no moral authority to say anything. However, the boy gets up optimistically and says that he knows what he is talking about because he lived close to real talent, and having said that, he was leaving and is grateful for the chance to fight. But a student tells his opponent, who was the vice captain, that he can't be a failure in sports either. After all, the three royalties have great expectations for him, so the boy goes after Ayase, preparing a punch, saying he's going to make him show his true skills. But he's interrupted by a spectacular flying kick right to the jugular worthy of a movie. It was the captain, who also said not to harass beginners, and that this brought shame to martial arts. And then two more students appeared, one called Kazuki from the performing arts program, where she stole everyone's attention because she was a star of the world-famous theater company. And the other one is Miwa. She is from the advanced class and got all the subjects in the entrance exam, besides being the youngest shogi champion and being the biggest promise of the sport. And without further ado, the captain is Nico-san from the sports program, and nothing less than an undefeated martial arts champion, a true machine. And together they are the three royalties, and they say they couldn't expect less from the daughter of a super actress. After all, he is stealing all the attention for himself. With this, the boy is impressed because the best students in each area of the school are girls, so they decide to congratulate him. And when they discover that he is a complete failure, in addition to being unmotivated at not being able to train him, he is also informed that there is no place for him at that school. However, the boy already had his transfer form and showed it to the girls, saying that he was going to be transferred to a general education school, firstly surprising them that this type of school exists, and secondly because he just said that since he is not welcome, he is getting out. But they tell him to wait and clean the dojo. After all, the losing side has the duty to clean, and despite the boy grumbling that he didn't even want to take the test, they say that's the rules and walk away. And with that, the boy just sadly picks up the bucket as everyone leaves. But they could hardly imagine that the mat was cleaner than when it was inaugurated, and they are surprised by the boy's dedication. Meanwhile, returning home, he thinks that when he was little, he just wanted to be admired like his mother, so he practiced in his room. But when he saw her rehearsing, he realized that she was a prodigy, and he was just mediocre. And after several failures in various areas he tried, people started to move away from him, including his mother, who was his only family, until his mother becomes bedridden, and he says he never noticed ever since he saw the series she did where she was a stay-at-home mom. And while she was watching, he says he likes that series, and in turn, his mother says she really likes it too. In this, he says that it is amazing that despite being a common series, he likes how the episodes always end with the family having dinner while smiling and talking about random things. And so his mother agrees that she likes that too. Then he thinks that it was the first time he had a conversation with his mother in years, and he realized that his mother always wanted a family identical to that series. Then a book is presented that says, "Dear you, I wish you a happy family. With love, Mommy." And then he closes the book, and the bed is empty as he walks away towards the exit. Back in the present, he remembers his mother's words and thinks that he will go after it and will make up for everything he and his mother missed out on. So he arrives at a new house and says that Mr. Mikadono told him to go straight into the house, and is surprised to see that his new house is a big mansion, thus wondering who Mr. Mikado is. But before he can even reason, Nico comes with a flying kick, thinking he is a thief, but he dodges, and with that she realizes it was him, but ends up falling to the ground in a suspicious pose. And of course, the boy took the opportunity to joke that even prodigies kneel down from time to time while doing an acting pose, leaving the girl completely embarrassed. So he throws a towel at her and calms her down, saying that preventing colds is part of martial arts, making her blush, and she ends up accepting, until she hears the sound of another girl coming and ends up running away from there. And so the other two who were in costume arrive at the place and wonder what he is doing in their house. Then Nico says he broke in, but luckily Sir Mikadono calls, and upon hearing it was him, the girls calm down on his cell phone. Mr. Mikadono says that his mother was a great friend and benefactor of his, so he is taking care of him so that her talents continue to live on, opening it in his house, and then asked if he knew his daughters. In case he forgot to mention, the eldest daughter Kazuki, the middle one Nico, and the youngest Miwa, and now that he introduced them, he should try to get along with them. Perplexed, the boy remembers his mother's last wish, that he could find a happy family, and so this is the story of how he, Yu Ayase, managed to become part of the family of the three talented Mikadono sisters. Obviously, the girls are shocked, while the boy thinks that the situation seems to have been taken straight from a dream, but he doesn't know if it's a good dream when he comes across them judging him. But Nico ends up accepting him after all. It was his father's decision, while he blushes, while the other to just wonder how their father accepted to take care of a loser, and despite being uncomfortable, the boy thinks he can try to be a family with them. He just has to stay strong, so he introduces himself cordially and says he hopes they get along well from now on. But when he was going to put his things away, he accidentally grabbed one of the oldest underwear, which flew out of his hand, and soon after he realized that the house was a complete mess. And after exploring the mess, he asks Kazuki about rehearsals taking up too much of her time, and she agrees that she doesn't have time for household chores. So she starts picking up the broken and wet dishes for some reason, and the sisters realize that she tried to wash them and ended up breaking them out of frustration at not being able to wash them. But soon it falls to Miwa, who didn't wash the clothes and started to defend herself, saying that they had many types of clothes, but is questioned by Yu that it is easier than memorizing several shogi pieces with that. The girl says that from now on he will take care of the laundry, and he even agrees, but says that he doesn't want the notes on how to wash clothes that she has in her hand to go to waste, leaving her embarrassed. And finally, he concludes that the cleaning is Nico's responsibility, who asks if it's fun to expose her flaws, and then calls him a failure. And while the three of them continue to insult him about how he failed the test in each area to make themselves feel better, he continues to clean the house easily, and when they realize it, they are impressed by how clean the house is now. He even jokes that while they were arguing, he cleaned everything, and then he poses like a movie and says he can do it whenever they want, leaving the three of them completely embarrassed at that moment, with both of them thinking that despite being a failure, he looks good, while he is all happy in the corner. The next day, he doesn't have class, so he decides to go at breakfast with them to get to know each other better, but he is interrupted by Nico, who was already practicing kicks early, and Miwa is racking his brains in the shogi game against an AI, and meanwhile Kazuki was doing his morning ritual of supplements and vitamins in an exaggerated way. And while he thinks he's not even remotely like them, Kazuki informs him that he's in charge of the house, that she has drama class, Miwa has shogi training, and Nico has her training. The boy just wanted to have breakfast faster, but Kazuki says she's late for training and tells him to get out of the way in a strict manner, while Miwa devours breakfast in seconds and goes back to an absurd focus on shogi. So he just gives up and goes to cook, while he thinks that it was exactly like that with his mother, that when he made breakfast she left without eating. However, later on she made a lot of food just for herself and kept it in the fridge, and he thinks that prodigies are very self-centered and you can never know what they are thinking. Then he thinks that he was not even able to deal with his real family, and if he would be able to one day make things work out between him and his three sisters. But he is interrupted by Nico, who is surprised by the great breakfast he made, and he soon responds that he made it with the ingredients that were almost spoiled, and already seeing the girl salivate, he offers some to her, where she played hard to get. But when he showed that he was going to eat it all by himself, she almost gave in, but said that she wouldn't eat his unbalanced meal. After all, it didn't have the exact amount of protein and fat, which made the boy wonder if she counts the exact amount of nutrients every time she eats. And soon the girl answers yes, and says you are what you eat, and that is as important as training. So it is impossible to be the best athlete if she does not have the best body. And with her and Miwa already late, he thinks they give him quite a headache. After all, who puts being better above eating what you want? But then he remembers that his mother went on a diet to get certain roles, so Kazuki does it to remain the main star, while Miwa devours sweets to feed her brain. So the prodigies end up being so self-centered that they don't see anything else, because they are driven by something bigger. So think about when he started to be afraid of his mother and stopped talking to her because he didn't understand her. And when he realizes that they are leaving, he decides to take action and asks them to wait, saying that they forgot something, which at first makes them despair and realize that they haven't forgotten anything. But the boy says have a good day, which made them react without words, but then they said it was nonsense and left. But the boy is willing not to give up. However, Nico, when she sees herself in the car mirror, is all blushing to hear that from him, and the other two are already embarrassed, remembering his words, and all three think they like those silly words. Meanwhile, at home, Mr. Mikadono calls the boy to find out the updates, and upon learning that everything is fine, he informs him that he will be away from home for a while longer due to work, which made you think that he is screwed with those three. But their father asks him for a favor, that it won't be long before they face obstacles of their own, and that he wants him to be their helping hand at this time, and that if he can help them with this, they will probably end up opening up more to him. And this clearly left the boy perplexed, as how someone as mediocre as him would be able to help someone like those three. And as for Yu, he is given the duty to help 3 girls discuss the things they hope to achieve soon. In Kazuki's case, she has a difficult audition coming up, and Nico is trying to win the national karate title. And finally, Miwa has a decisive shogi match coming up. If he can help them, you will have a better chance of getting closer to them. After ending the call, he questions whether they really need his help. After all, he considers himself average in both sports and academics. Thus, Yu believes he's incapable of helping these girls, who are at the peak of their performance compared to him. And to make matters worse, he begins to imagine the comments people will make if the girls fail. Even with his help, this makes him even more apprehensive. After all, people would certainly use Yu Ayase's, his mother's, talent against Yu, saying he certainly didn't inherit hers. To try to calm down a bit, Yu decides to go to the market to buy things to cook for the girls. And during the meal, he can get to know each of them better. Well, as soon as Nico returns home and sees him cooking for her, she misunderstands, believing he's trying to buy her food. Then, she makes it clear that she's already bought her own meal, so she'll refuse the one he prepared. With that said, she goes to take a shower, and as soon as she returns to the kitchen, Nico sees him cooking with even more intensity and realizes he's really taking the task seriously. And seeing all those cookbooks on the table, Nico deduces that he's increasing his productivity in an attempt to more easily convince her to trust him, since she initially refused his food. And suddenly, Miwa comes home, and Yu goes to her and says that she is making their food. However, Miwa interprets this as something pathetic, and Nico says that the boy is probably just trying to get attention. And what's more, Nico says that she is very strict with any food she eats, so she prefers to eat a snack that she bought herself, because that way, she will be sure that she will not be putting anything fatty or harmful into her body. But while eating that bland snack, Nico becomes curious about what the boy has prepared, so she goes back down to the kitchen. Seeing the empty space, she decides to take a peek at what exactly he'd prepared for them. She's surprised to see that from the start, he'd prepared a perfectly balanced meal, made strictly for athletes. Suddenly, Yu appears right behind her with a frightening look on his face, and tells her that the food is 30 grams of protein. Hearing his voice coming from nowhere behind her, Nico lets out a startled scream. Yu approaches her with an even more intimidating look as he goes through all the black guy's data. Seeing him talking like a chatterbox, Nico says she understands him, and then Yu says he used some recipes recommended by nutritionists and adapted them for her. And upon discovering he made all that sacrifice just for her, Nico is embarrassed for having rejected his food in the beginning, so she makes up for it by trying his. And not wanting to praise him, Nico congratulates the creator of the recipe Yu used, but not him. Meanwhile, Miwa heads to the stairs of the house, and upon seeing the food from afar, she begins to descend the stairs slowly, trying to serve herself without Yu seeing her. However, the neighborhood appears right behind her, and begins rattling off the dishes to details like a psychopath. And to avoid continuing to be pressured by him, Miwa sits down on the chair and says she'll try his dish to see how it is. But as she prepares to eat, he stands beside her, staring at her with that intimidating look from before. Then, the girl asks him to excuse her, because she can't eat with a crazy person staring at her like that. But even after hearing this request, he remains planted beside her, saying he won't leave. And suddenly, in the middle of the meal, Kazuki arrives home and finds it strange that his sisters have arrived so early. And as soon as she notices the feast on the table, Kazuki is astonished. Yu also approaches her to discuss every detail of the dish, trying to reassure her and get her to eat quickly. And although he tries hard to please her, Kazuki acts tough, saying she won't be convinced by food like Nico and Miwa were. Upon hearing this, Nico calls her attention back, saying that this time, you finally got something right. But still, Kazuki is skeptical of her statement, and says that even though they look like a happy family during a meal, this kind of scene doesn't suit her, as Kazuki doesn't like these tables, much less whoever prepared their food. Upon hearing these words, Nico takes Kazuki's plate and tells her she really doesn't deserve food as good as Yu's. As for Yu, he warns Nico that eating angry is quick and will make her gain weight more easily. Hearing this, Nico begins to worry, but Yu makes it clear that he will monitor everything she eats. And well, 3 days after he started living with the 3 girls, he realizes that Kazuki remains the hardest girl to approach. And although the girl's father asked him to help his daughters, Yu believes that if things continue this way, he won't even be able to meet them, let alone help them. And at recess, Yu notices Kazuki attracting attention from the other girls despite being a woman, something that impresses him. But beyond her good looks, Kazuki is also the top student in her performing arts class, something that makes her even less approachable to anyone. However, despite these barriers, Yu takes the initiative and goes to talk to her amidst the crowd. And as expected, the neighborhood is humiliated by all the girls, who remember him only as the son of a famous actress, even though he doesn't have as much talent as his mother. As for Kazuki, she participates in the humiliation, telling him not to get too close to her, because if he does, he'll surely dull her shine with his dirty aura. Upon hearing this, Yu begins to argue with her, saying she spent the entire night hoping Kazuki would give in to her inversions. Furthermore, Yu reveals that he has something only he can offer her, and he assures her she'll love it. And although this thing is referring to food, the girls assume he's talking about something a little hotter. After all, Yu, as as usual, couldn't explain himself properly. And to make matters worse, he says she'll see him when they get home. Upon hearing this, the girls discover that the two live together, and then they start asking if they're dating. And well, when he meets Miwa, Yu invites her to go to the cafeteria with him. However, she starts running in an attempt to escape him, until suddenly, he manages to catch up with the girl, who begins to confide in him, saying that she is a completely different girl of the other students in the room, to the point where Shennet even being able to understand a normal conversation between girls. Upon hearing this, he says he is able to understand her, but right after saying this, he makes it clear that he doesn't want to pretend to fully understand what she's going through, as that would be impossible. But at the same time, he believes he is able to understand at least a little of what she feels. After all, he is in the same position. After changing the subject, he reveals that he intends to win Kazuki over, and asks Miwa for help to make it easier. Upon hearing this, Miwa explains that when Kazuki was 3, she asked their mother to prepare a secret meal just for her. Miwa tells him to use this random story as a clue to help him win Kazuki over. Yu then decides to cook the same dish her mother made, but he realizes he'll need to find out which dish her mother made that day. And well, after managing to make the recipe, Yu invites Kazuki to try his food, and says that this time, he prepared something she will really like. But before she can see what he prepared, Kazuki falls to the floor unconscious, and is then helped by her sisters, who are worried about her situation. However, Kazuki tells them to stop all that drama, and assures her that she will be fine. But as soon as Miwa touches her head, the girl burns herself to death. Nico becomes irritated with Kazuki, and tells her to stop acting tough when she clearly needs help. Suddenly, Yu comes to her with some nutrient-rich porridge to help her get better as soon as possible. Seeing their excessive concern, Kazuki locks himself in his room and tells everyone to leave. Later, Yu returns to her room with another recipe, but Kazuki again tells him to stop bothering her. With that said, she tries to approach him to kick him out of her room, but after taking a few steps, Kazuki falls on top of him. Suddenly, Yu has the idea of being her scene partner until she gets better and can return to rehearsals. Hearing this, Kazuki remembers that he's the son of a very talented actress, so she assumes he's at least a decent actor. However, as soon as he opens his mouth to play the princess, Kazuki realizes he's actually more clumsy than she imagined. Kazuki then kicks him out of her room, saying she'd rather rehearse alone than have a mediocre assistant like him. And well, the next day, he goes to her room again and tells her he's read the entire script. But still, Kazuki notices that he's still stuck, so he kicks him out of her room again. And as the days go by, he tries to rehearse with her several times, but Kazuki keeps kicking him out of her room. And one night, Kazuki remembers that she's practically the star of the play, so she feels the need to find a way to get out of bed and put an end to her discomfort, once and for all, to avoid disappointing the people who will be in the play. With that, she leaves her room, and as she passes by the living room, Kazuki sees Yu watching a play, with the sole intention of improving her performance and helping Kazuki. And the next day, he returns to rehearse with her, when suddenly, Kazuki notices a certain improvement in the boy's performance. She then gives in, and says she will eat his food, but she asks him to leave out a ton of ingredients. Upon hearing this, Yu discovers that in fact, Kazuki has been skipping his food all this time just to avoid admitting that she's picky about food. And seeing Kazuki eating Yu's food, Nico becomes shocked. As for the boy, Yu scares Kazuki by telling him she's eating food with carrots, and although she's shocked by this information, Yu remains calm, having finally managed to get the girls to eat his food. But later, the girls refuse to eat his food, as they'll be busy with dirty chores that day. Hearing this, Yu is disappointed. After all, they were just starting to eat together, and missing out on that was something he hadn't planned on. However, remembering that his mother used to be away from home for months at a time, Yu realizes that being alone for a day won't be a problem. At the same time, Yu says that this is precisely what made him distance himself from his mother. Furthermore, he remembers that his mother was as talented as the 3 girls, and that Yu, like himself, considers himself a nobody and incapable of doing anything. And remembering the girl's father's request, Yu realizes that he will have some difficulty fulfilling it. He then decides to go see a movie to relax a bit, and in doing so, he begins to feel emotional watching an everyday family scene. And upon seeing that the series protagonist is his mother, Yu feels something strange. After all, his mother seems happy in her role while having fun with her family, something he can't have so easily, considering the 3 girls don't make his life any easier. And speaking of them, the bottles finally return, and Yu greets them with tears in his eyes. Then, Nico finds this strange and asks why he's crying, and Yu, in turn, says he just couldn't handle it after watching a moving TV show. As for Kazuki, he notices that one of the actresses is the boy's mother, and then deduces that he's missing his mother so much that he can't even contain his emotions. She sympathizes with Yu, telling him he doesn't need to do chores or cook just to try to win her over. As for Miwa, she confirms Kazuki's point and tells him not to overexert himself. Nico also joins in the conversation and reminds him that he's just doing the housework, so he shouldn't do everything himself as if they weren't the real owners. But upon hearing this, Yu says he doesn't see himself the way she describes him. Instead of being someone living in a stranger's house, he wants to be part of the family, connecting with them like a younger brother. Seeing him treat them like family, the girls are left confused, and Nico describes what he said as ridiculous. After all, she believes he's just repeating what she usually sees on TV. Furthermore, she finds the concept of a happy family to be greatly overrated, as she doesn't even know how a family is formed. And right after she says this, the series actor confesses to the actress, saying he'll form a happy family with her. Upon seeing this, the three girls deduce that Yu is actually confessing his love to them, wanting to be their husband. At this point, Kazuki begins to idealize himself as a bride and begins to go into denial, as he doesn't believe she truly wants to marry a boy like him. As for the other girls, they also start to see themselves as brides, but soon come to their senses and realize they were just carried away by the soap opera on TV. As for Yu, he asks to exchange birthday information with Nico. After all, he wants to take seriously the idea after become a family with the girls, and so he needs to know her age, so that you can define Nico as his older or younger sister. And upon hearing this, Nico begins to sweat with rage, and so the three sisters make it clear that he will never be more than a simple parasite to them. Now in the shower, Nico remains thoughtful about what she heard from the boy, calling him an idiot for coming up with such an idea so suddenly. But upon further reflection, she remembers that he's just a teenager living with three girls, so it's natural that he doesn't fully understand what's going on there after all. She can't understand it either. And suddenly, Yu lets out a scream that everyone in the house can hear. Nico runs to him to see what's going on and discovers that he simply remembered he didn't buy bread for breakfast. At this, she begins to scold him, telling him to stop caring about any small mistakes he makes. As for him, Yu notices her in a towel and tells her to get dressed quickly to avoid catching a cold. Upon realizing she's actually naked, Nico becomes embarrassed and runs away until she's suddenly spotted by Miwa. After exchanging a few words, she notices Nico's red face and asks what happened. Nico, unsure of what to say, says she felt a little dizzy from the hot bath she recently took. But upon hearing this, Miwa clearly realizes she's lying and reminds her that Nico was only in the bath for 5 minutes. As for Yu, he interrupts the girls' conversation and tells Miwa that he's already folded the clothes for her. As soon as she touches the clothes, then closer to him, Miwa starts to blush too, and ends up dropping them on the floor. Nico notices her blushing and points it out. However, Miwa covers it up, saying that her face has always been redder. However, Nico says that in fact, she must also have a crush on you. And upon hearing her use the word "to" in the sentence, Miwa realizes she's missed a slip, revealing that Nico also likes you. While the girls are fighting, Kazuki arrives and, upon seeing the two sisters nearly killing each other, tells them to stop and act more appropriately for their age. As for Yu, he asks Kazuki for help reaching a pot on the top shelf. She helps him, and as soon as she turns away from the boy's view, Kazuki's cheeks turn red. The other two sisters notice her embarrassment and stare at her, which leads to a fight between the three of them. Yu steps in and tells them to stop fighting. After all, sisters should get along, which is the complete opposite of what they're doing. And as soon as the girls leave, Yu realizes that real life will never be like a TV show. But at the same time, he remembers the fun they had eating together at the same table. So, Yu believes these little happy moments are worth it. And when he picks up a photo of the three sisters as children, Yu is surprised to discover that the girls were much cuter than they are now. After all, the three sisters now look more like villains from a horror movie than anything else. Well, after trying to talk to the sisters to find out which one took down the photo, Yu realizes they're lying to him, since none of them admit to having a family photo. Yu then tries to figure out which sister was responsible for keeping that photo. After all, to become a member of the family, he needs to better understand all the sisters and determine which one would still be interested in keeping that photo. And the very next day, Yu tries to speak with his sisters, but just like before, they say goodbye to him to go on a business trip. And already at school, Yu searches his phone to find out exactly where the girls went. And later that night, Yu talks to his sisters about their upcoming trip the next day, and says he made them warm milk to help them sleep better and earlier. And Miwa, as for her, complains about not having booked their rooms yet, but Yu reassures her, saying he's already done that work for them. Even with everything sorted out, Miwa complains about having to eat hotel food for days. Hearing this, Yu assumes she'll miss her cooking, but the girl turns her face away and says she didn't mention it at any point in the conversation. Later, Miwa participates in the shogi tournament, and as expected, she manages to defeat her opponents without much difficulty. One of the event organizers approaches her and reminds her that Miwa will face a master the next day, so she advises Miwa to go prepared. Hearing this, Miwa heads back home thinking about the match, and then decides to train a little with the AI later that night. And well, when she goes to the hotel and finds Kazuki, Miwa asks what she's doing there. To this, her sister changes the subject, saying that that place is near the theater where she'll be performing, and as for Miwa, she says the same. At this, Nico boos the two sisters and like them. She's also surprised to discover that they're staying at the same hotel as her, and suddenly, he shows up and starts disdaining the three of them, as they don't even know where their appointment will be. And as if that weren't enough, they discover that Yu has booked the same room for all three of them, and although they seem upset, Yu tells them they should be happy about it and share the room like three sisters would. Furthermore, Yu tells them that there will be a cherry blossom festival that night, and then suggests they attend the event to have fun as a family. After all, this was the same event that was taking place in the photo you found. So he deduces that whoever saved the photo wanted to go to that event again someday. But as soon as they hear this, the sisters begin to complain to him, saying they don't have time for anything, considering they'll be busy the next day. Upon hearing this, he tries to convince them, saying that the event has a shrine that deducts the contestants' luck, so they can go there just to have fun, because he believes they'll do their best if they take the time to have fun. But before heading to the event, he takes the sisters shopping for some kimonos. As they try on the outfits, he takes countless photos of the girls, saying they look great in them. However, Nico refuses to wear them, preferring more sporty clothing. He brings her a Ross kimono, but the owner of the establishment brings another kimono for the girl, saying that one suits Nico better. In this, she tries on the outfit separated by Yu, and says that she looks strange in it. However, Yu screams with emotion when she sees that in fact, she looked incredible in that kimono. Upon arriving at the Cherry Blossom Festival, the girls start to feel hungry. So, Yu asks the girls not to stray from him. However, Kazuki ends up distancing himself after being approached by a group of girls, who begin to worship her as if she were the main star of the event. Seeing all this, Yu becomes dissatisfied with the direction things are going, as he would like to see all the sisters relaxing at the event as a family. However, Kazuki has already ruined that plan by activating his work mode at the event, and although he doesn't like it, Yu decides not to interfere. Meanwhile, the other two sisters stand back and watch Kazuki's fame and love of flattery. Miwa and Nico, however, decide to stay away from the crowd and enjoy the event more. One of the girls in the crowd around Kazuki decides to leave, saying that even though she's very pretty, Kazuki is still a girl, so she doesn't see anything wrong with her. But when she steps wrong, she trips until suddenly, Kazuki catches her, preventing her from falling hard to the ground. She then begins to lead the girl to a place where she can sit, and meanwhile, the girls in the background begin to feel jealous, begging to be theirs instead of the girl, who, by the way, didn't care about Kazuki at all. As for Yu, he realizes it will be difficult to get close to Kazuki with all that crowd surrounding her. So, he becomes more vigilant not to lose sight of her. And well, after Kazuki leaves the girl in a safe place, she continues walking through the event, until suddenly, she is captured by Yu, who takes her to a place away from the view of her fans, and tells her that she should enjoy the festival more. Furthermore, Yu says he noticed she was walking awkwardly, as if her foot was injured, and so he takes the strap of her sandal from his pocket and hurries to put it back in place. But as soon as he sees her foot, Yu realizes the situation was worse than he had imagined, and remembering that she was carrying a person in that state makes Yu even more indignant with her. However, Kazuki reminds him that because she is the heroic prince, she should never count on the help of others, as the mere idea of the prince being saved by someone else is completely absurd. Upon hearing this, Yu disagrees, saying she shouldn't care who gets saved, because in his view, the prince also has every right to be the princess sometimes. With that said, Yu advises Kazuki to be whoever she wants to be, without any social constraints or pressure from anyone. Hearing this, Kazuki finally understands what he means, and then extends his foot to Yu, implying that he will let her take care of her, thus assuming the princess role the boy had mentioned. Meanwhile, Nico plays one of the event's games, trying to catch a fish with a fragile accessory that tears easily. And seeing Nico failing, Miwa starts to tease her sister, saying that she's really bad at that game. After all, she tries to catch the fish almost as if she were trying to catch a bear, and because of that, she obviously ends up losing the fish from her hands. And suddenly, Yu goes up to the two girls with Kazuki, and asks them to let them both join the game with them. But as soon as the sisters see Kazuki with a flashy mask on his face, they ask what it is, to which Yu explains that she's just in disguise. Hearing this, Miwa agrees that Kazuki should wear that smiling mask all the time. After all, it will disguise the serious look she always has on her face. As for Yu, he stops these comments. Unnecessary to start the hunting Gamito the fish, and during the game, everyone's racket breaks, except for Miwa, who manages to catch the fish. Everyone complains to her, but Miwa says they're just jealous that she's good and they're terrible. Seeing them fighting so much over so little, Yu advises them to stop being so competitive and not take that simple game so seriously. With that, he leaves the three sisters alone, so they can learn to have fun with each other. Yu goes to the event venue where they'll test their luck. In this event, the participants must jump between lotus-shaped platforms until they reach the Torii Gate. If the participant manages to reach the Torii Gate without stepping on any false platforms, they will be blessed with unparalleled luck as a competitor. And what's more, they'll also get to take a photo with the shrine's golden guardian. Upon seeing the guardian, Yu notices that it's the same decorative statue the sisters were holding when they took their photo together. Yu vows to do his best to win the game. If he wins the right to take a photo with the statue, he'll invite the sisters to recreate that same photo from years ago. And Yu believes they'll remember how close they were when they were younger. And well, right after the game begins, the first participant is disqualified. Yu is called to be the next participant, but he is soon disqualified. However, he discovers he can keep trying to reach the Torii Gate as many times as he wants. So, he challenges himself to the same game again, but again fails. The other participants look at the dirty boy, and realize he should have given up earlier while there was still time. However, he gets up and asks to try again. And as time passes, he continues trying to complete the challenge until suddenly it starts to rain. At that moment, the event organizers decide to stop the game and offer to let the boy take a photo with the statue, even though he hasn't reached the Torii Gate. But upon hearing this, he remembers that the three sisters earned the right to the photo with their perseverance and intelligence, so he decides to do the same, and jumps between the platforms again, confident he can overcome this challenge. And on his last attempt, he finally manages to reach the Torii Gate. He runs to the festival to call the sisters and take the photo. However, he realizes that the event had already ended long ago, and just like before, he feels like he's angered the sisters after being abandoned by him. At this, he begins to regret, believing the sisters will drift even further apart than before. And because he's just a stranger who suddenly entered their lives, he feels he should be the last person to interfere in their lives. Well, during his reflections, he's interrupted by the sisters, who are still at the festival and looking for him. Nico begins to complain to him, saying that he promised he'd return to them in a moment, but now, he's just lying in the rain with his face covered in mud. Seeing them in front of him, he was surprised, as he thought they were already home. However, Kazuki reminds him that he's their guide at the festival, so it's his job to take them home. As for Nico, she apologizes to him, saying she couldn't afford an extra umbrella, so the three girls offer him a spot in their umbrellas. However, they say this at the same time, and Yu doesn't quite understand any of them. In the end, the girls play a joker to see who will walk with Yu under the umbrella, and in the end, Nico ends up being the lucky one. Although they are just walking together, she begins to feel her heart race, almost as if she had just run a marathon. At another point, he meets them again and wishes them good luck with their tasks the next day. Seeing him in a deplorable state, the girls advise him to take a shower as soon as possible. However, he says he forgot to reserve a room for himself, so he doesn't have access to the hotel's guest house like them. Furthermore, all the hotels are fully booked due to the Cherry Blossom event, so Yu says he'll stay at an internet cafe. But upon hearing this, Kazuki decides to let him sleep in the same room as them, but says he'll only do it for that night. Yu begins to feel guilty about it. After all, he wanted the three of them to be alone and enjoy the night like good sisters. But now that he's there, he feels like he's ruining everything. However, Nico makes it clear that they would never abandon him. After all, that would be a dishonor to the family name. As for Miwa, she reminds him that they already live together, so it would be strange for them not to invite him to sleep in their room. While looking for a bathrobe, he finds it in the closet on the top shelf. He reaches out to grab the clothes, but in doing so, he gets too close to Nico, who starts blushing just seeing him near her. As soon as he leaves, the sisters are embarrassed to have a boy with them in such a small room. Hearing a noise coming from the room, Yu apologizes to them and says he planned to let the three of them spend that time alone, without anyone else, much less him. So, Yu asks them to know he's not there and to get some rest. And even though he asks them to, the girls remain blushing with embarrassment, feeling like they won't be able to rest like this. And well, when they turn out the lights to go to sleep, the sisters remain awake and red-faced. They wonder what could be happening to them, and then deduce that they're just anxious about the important tasks they have the next day. Meanwhile, he remembers the moment he took the girls to take pictures with the statue, and as he steps back to try to get a better angle, Yu ends up backslamming into a tree laden with water, which falls on his head. The girls smile genuinely at the scene, and Yu seizes this unique moment to take the photo, which, incidentally, is identical to the one they took in the past. He then starts searching for the old photo to compare the two, but discovers that the owner of the photo has already taken it back from him. And well, after a few minutes, he finally deletes it. Then, the sisters begin to talk about the event in their past, and during the conversation, Kazuki notices that they have gradually stopped talking to each other and have isolated themselves only in their own tasks, even though they live together. But now, they're talking more after a long time, and suddenly, in the middle of their conversation, Miwa pulls out the old and new photos to compare, and is amazed at Yu's kindness and wanting to make them happy, even with something simple. And the next day, Yu watches TV and learns that the Mikadono sisters succeeded in their tasks that day in this case. Kazuki's performance was a huge success, and as for Miwa and Nico, they dominated the tournaments they participated in, something that leaves you speechless. As the days pass, he notices that the sisters have started to get along better after they went to the Cherry Blossom Festival, something that makes you happy, because for him, they should have been like this from the start. And remembering that he had promised to make a feast for when they return, he rushes home from school, hoping to have time to make the girls dinner. However, still at the door, he sees their shoes, and finds it strange that they arrived home earlier than him. Yu enters the house and sees an unknown man sitting on the sofa, but upon hearing his voice, he realizes it's Mr. Mikadono. Yu runs to him and thanks him for welcoming him into his home. He laments again about what happened to Yu's mother, but tells him there's nothing to worry about. After all, her talents will always live on as long as Yu grows and develops. With that said, Mikadono decides to return to the conversation with the girls and asks Kazuki to update him on her performance. She simply says that her shows were packed with fans and that the critics are in her favor. As for Nico, she says she won the championship, something she's already used to doing. However, she says she has another tournament coming up, so she's in no mood to relax. Following Miwa, she says she won the preliminary matches and will advance to the finals. Hearing all the girls, Mikadono urges them to keep trying and then turns to leave. Seeing him in such a hurry, Yu tries to call him back, but Mikadono says he only stopped by to get a report from his daughters. So now that he knows how they're doing, he needs to leave. However, Yu insists, saying he'll make dinner for the girls. So he asks Mikadono to stay for dinner with them. He decides to stay a little longer, but upon noticing a strange mask in the place, Mikadono asked what it is. Yu says he got it from a festival they attended over the weekend. Seeing that Yu was wasting the girls' time with the festival, Mikadono says he's just getting in the way of his daughter's rise to the top. But upon hearing this, Yu says that there's actually a shrine at these festivals that brings luck to competitors. So he believes this outing was perfect for them. And despite this, Mikadono continues to take it all in the worst possible light, as he believes that relying on luck is not the path for anyone. After all, luck is only achieved through continuous effort. Having said that, Mikadono begins to talk about Yu's background, and says that even though he is the son of the talented actor Yu Ayase, he still has no noteworthy achievements, which for Mikadono makes him nothing more than a zero. Furthermore, Mikadono makes it clear that there is no room in his home for talentless children. Hearing this, Yu is left speechless, and Mikadono then states that they will not allow anyone who brings this weak mentality into their home. And upon seeing how their father is treating the boy, the three sisters tell him to calm down. Even though Yu has no recognized achievements, he still does an excellent job with the housework, which is a great relief for them, as only with an organized home can they have peace and time to hone their talents. And when he notices them defending a boy they barely know, Mikadono asks if they really need Yu for anything, to which Miwa says that she doesn't necessarily need him. After all, Yu is just a convenient piece to have on hand for when he is useful. But even though they defend him, Mikadono says that Yu doesn't seem compatible with the three of them. However, the girls keep butting heads with him and say that Yu is completely compatible with them. A week later, Yu continues to think about the things he heard from the girl's father. After meeting him, Yu finally understands why the girls are so determined and eager to improve. In fact, they're simply concerned with doing their father's bidding, who, by the way, is very strict. And although Mikadono appears to be a respectable, accomplished man, his aura that day took all the shine off his daughters. And to make matters worse, this happened just when the girls had just started to get along. Meanwhile, Nico decides to take a break after intense training, but when eating her usual snack, Nico complains that it doesn't taste as good as it used to. The other sisters share the same complaint. As for Yu, he's disappointed to remember that his initial thought was to live like that ideal family from a drama, but now he believes his idea of a perfect family was just a mediocre idea in his head. But as soon as he says this, he remembers his mother's words, saying that she, too, would like to have a family like the one in a drama. With that, he returns to his place and says he needs to do whatever he can to make the three sisters an ideal family. As for Nico and the others, they leave the house for another day of school, but this time, Nico notices that Yu is no longer there in the hallway to wish them good morning something. That seemed simple before, but since she no longer has that, Nico begins to miss those words. And now at school, the girls notice that Yu left a lunchbox for each of them in their bags, something they didn't expect. And as soon as he returns home, Kazuki calls him for a chat and then tells him they should establish a co-management. In this case, Kazuki says he's willing to accept Yu as one of them, but to do so, he'll have to help her with the difficult upcoming audition. Furthermore, Nico says she'll also need his help with an important upcoming tournament. And finally, Miwa says she has decisive matches, and therefore, she'll need his help too. Upon hearing this, Yu says he'll help them in any way he can, starting with making their lunches every day. After all, he already considers himself part of their family. But upon hearing this, the sisters dismiss him, saying Yu is just their supporter. And well, the next day, Yu makes their lunches and then wishes them all a good day. With that, the girls leave the house and realize that hearing Yu say this to them really makes a difference in their day. And although Yu can't do anything more than that, he promises to do his best to help them. And at another point, Nico receives a call from her senpai in the middle of training. In the call, he says he heard about her excellent performance. But upon hearing this, Nico tries to maintain apparent humility, saying she's not all that great. And as for the boy, he says he just returned from an overseas tour. And since they haven't seen each other in a long time, he says he's eager to see how much she's improved in the next tournament. And meanwhile, Miwa plays poorly and decides to forfeit the match against her master, at least for now. And as they return home, the three sisters think about what Mikadono told them and begin to feel even more tense. But as soon as they arrive home, they are greeted by Yu, who already had their dinner prepared. However, as soon as Nico notices a mediocre taste in Thuhen, she eats his food. She remembers what their father had said about mediocrity. In this case, Mikadono abhors mediocrity, believing her to be a bad brother, and their duty as Mikadono is to combat any and all mediocrity. But instead, the girls approve of Yu's mediocre cooking, and after finishing the meal, Kazuki goes to the boy and offers to help him wash the dishes. Upon seeing something like that coming from her, Yu is shocked, and Kazuki, in turn, tries to clear her record, saying she's not doing it for the boy. In fact, she's just trying to cultivate her feminine side. side. But upon hearing this excuse, Yu says she doesn't need to be feminine to wash her own dishes. And as they wash the dishes together, Yu asks if she's feeling more comfortable about the difficult test she'll have. To this, Kazuki says she's not sure yet. After all, this will be her first time playing this type of role. So she says she's very nervous about the situation. However, Kazuki reports feeling a little less tense when she got home and saw Yu making jokes to make them laugh, so she believes everything will be okay in the end. And although she says this, Kazuki makes it clear that she's not feeling bad because of Yu, but because of something else. Having said that, she notices Yu with his bandaged fingers and asks what happened. To this, he says he only cut his fingers a little while cooking, because contrary to what she thinks, Yu is not an experienced cook. Hearing this, Kazuki realizes that the boy, despite being clumsy, still doesn't give up on his tasks until the end. And suddenly, Yu falls to the ground and hurts his nose. Kazuki, worried about him, goes to the boy to see if he's seriously hurt, but she ends up tripping and falling on top of him, kissing him. And even though it was all a big accident, Yu apologizes for accidentally kissing her. However, Kazuki tells him to calm down and says she didn't really kiss him. In fact, they just had a minor accident. Seeing that she didn't touch him, Yu is relieved, but at the same time, he feels sorry for Kazuki for kissing a guy with a bloody nose. However, Yu deduces that she's already performed similar scenes on stage, so she's used to it. Another day, Yu goes to Kazuki's room to talk about the kiss they accidentally shared, and says he understands if she's offended by kissing a loser like him, so he intends to pretend that kiss never happened. With that, Yu leaves her room, and Kazuki stays behind, feeling bad that he treated their kiss as something forgettable. But at the same time, she realizes he's right, because Kazuki needs to forget about it and focus solely on her play. She's been cast as a woman for the first time, and since she's always played a man, Kazuki needs to practice her femininity. But during the play's kiss, she remembers the real kiss she gave Yu, and this ends up getting in her way. She gets scolded by the team supervisor, who tells her to stop mixing her private life with acting. And upon returning home, Kazuki tells Yu that her training is getting more demanding, so she asks him to prepare more energetic meals for her to be able to handle her training. Yu is willing to take care of everything she needs. However, Kazuki abuses her goodwill even more, asking him to go on a date with her that Sunday. And when he was asked to go on a date with her, Yu doesn't understand exactly what Kazuki wants with him. And after thinking about it a little more, he deduces that it has something to do with that accidental kiss they shared not long ago. Meanwhile, the other sisters listen to their conversation from afar and are surprised to see Kazuki asking the boy out on a date. As for Miwa, she wonders if he really wants to go on this date with Kazuki. And seeing her overthinking it, Nico suggests they go back to their room. Returning to Yu, he says he doesn't understand her reasons for the meeting. Kazuki explains that she's spent her entire life playing male roles, and because of that, she's having difficulty with the next audition, which in this case is the role of a heroine. Hearing this, Yu finally understands her plan. Kazuki wants to go on a date with him so she can better connect with the heroine. He offers to help her with whatever she needs, but Kazuki asks him not to tell the other two sisters about their date that weekend. He then promises to do as she asks, and then suggests they make the date as real as possible so she can more easily relate to the heroine. At another point, Nico goes to Yu and asks if he'll do anything that Sunday, and he replies no, as he'll stay home and support them as always. Upon hearing this answer, Nico immediately realizes the boy is lying remorselessly, and because he has to resort to lying, Nico believes he and Kazuki will do something very wrong on this date. As for Miwa, she remembers going to Kazuki's bedroom door to listen in on her conversation. Yu had promised to take her on a great date, which made Miwa even more intrigued. And well, as they sit down at dinner together, Yu notices Nico and Miwa with strange looks in their eyes, and then wonders why the mood is so tense. But as soon as they notice the boy looking at Kazuki, as if he's talking about the date they're having the next day, it makes the sisters even more irritated. Yu still doesn't understand them, deducing that they have some important game the next day, which is why they're acting strange. And well, when the day of the meeting arrives, Yu goes to the place where they arranged to meet. As for Miwa and Nico, they follow him without him noticing their presence. And upon paying more attention to the boy, Nico notices that he's more cheerful than usual, even though he's only meeting Kazuki. And after waiting a few more minutes, Yu is surprised by Kazuki, who comes to him fully dressed for the meeting. At this point, she begins speaking to Yu in a very masculine manner and then corrects herself, making her voice higher and more submissive. Furthermore, she decides to change her address to him. Instead of newbie, she will now call him by his name. With that, they begin walking around town looking for an event to attend together, and Yu decides to take her to the aquarium. Meanwhile, Nico watches Kazuki from afar, wondering how she suddenly went from Prince Charming to a cute girl. And suddenly, upon seeing a staircase nearby, Kazuki speaks in a more masculine tone, telling Yu to be careful of the steps as she descends. Yu corrects her, saying that, in fact, she should hold his hand so he can help her down. Continuing on with the tour, they arrive at the aquarium. Kazuki tries to emulate the reaction of a cute girl upon seeing the animals, but she still wonders if her performance is convincing enough. And as for Yu, he notices she is very worried about the this performance and suggests she forget about it for a while and just focus on having fun. But suddenly, the dolphins jump into the water, leaving you vulnerable. However, Kazuki manages to get in the middle of it just in time for the boy to get wet. And although she manages to help him, he tells her she messed up again, as this is definitely not the attitude expected of a cute girl. And as the date progresses, Miwa realizes he's being a complete failure, and this makes her a little more relieved. Suddenly, he feels the urge to go to the bathroom and then moves away from Kazuki. She takes the time to reflect on her poor performance that day, telling herself that she's just as much of a failure as you. She also remembers the sparkle in his eyes when he found out he was going out with her, and she worries that he might be disappointed in her. Suddenly, in the middle of her thoughts, Kazuki is interrupted by a modeling agency scout the boy, in fact, trying to get his agency card for her. However, Kazuki refuses his offer. At this, the boy insists, saying that she's a true diamond in the rough, so beautiful. He lets himself be pushed aside and tries to pull her by the arm. But at that very moment, he returns from the bathroom and slaps the boy's arm, asking if he can help him with anything. At this, the boy begins to disdain you, believing he should just be Kazuki's little brother. Seeing that the scout isn't understanding, Yu explains that he's on a date with Kazuki, so he turns his back to leave and says that Kazuki already knows what she wants to be, so she doesn't need to join any modeling agency. Upon hearing this, the scout insists on talking to them and asks what exactly she wants to be. Yu doesn't know what to say, as he hasn't come up with such a complex script yet, so he makes up an excuse on the spot, saying that Kazuki wants to be an artist. The scout takes advantage of this opportunity and says that his agency is perfect for aspiring artists due to his high profile. While Yu tries to pull the boy away from them, Kazuki watches from afar and notices that Yu is really bad at making excuses, so she begs him to just stop talking. However, Yu decides to play her final card and tells the scout that he can't be with Kazuki because he intends to marry her. Upon hearing this, the scout doesn't take him too seriously, but ultimately decides to leave them alone. As for Miwa and Nico, they begin to worry about how the date is going, as everything is going so, well, the complete opposite of what they expected. And as he walks around the shops with Kazuki, he's constantly mistaken for her younger brother. So, to reverse this misconception, Yu intertwines his fingers with Kazuki's, thus conveying a stronger sense of couplehood. And heading to the cinema, Yu decides to watch a romance film with her. But upon seeing the film he chose, Kazuki immediately remembers it. After all, it was the first film his senpai starred in, and although it's been over a year, Kazuki says he's never been able to watch it because he was afraid of seeing his friend's performance. And as for Yu, he says that she might actually benefit from knowing the actress and be even more inspired by her audition. But as soon as he starts watching the movie, Kazuki notices that her senpai continues to maintain her same acting habits. In this case, she was used to playing only villains, and because of this, Kazuki notices that she's not performing very well as a heroine. And at the end of the film, Kazuki hears some comments disapproving of the film precisely because of her senpai's performance. Hearing this, the fear of failure begins to increase even more. At this, Yu notices Kazuki's tense look and begins to blame herself for it. After all, her senpai only made Kazuki even more worried about her performance. And as a way to try to make things right, Yu decides to take her to her final destination, a Ferris wheel. Although Kazuki isn't in the mood for it, she swallows her negative feelings and gets on the ride with him. Meanwhile, Miwa observes Yu's next move and criticizes him for it. After all, the Ferris wheel is simply one of the biggest date cliches. However, suddenly, two men pass by the sisters and mention a rumor about the Ferris wheel. The rumor says that whoever declares their love for the person on that Ferris wheel will win that person over forever. Upon hearing this absurd superstition, Kazuki says she'd never heard of it. As she climbs onto the Ferris wheel, she realizes that Yu is taking their meeting very seriously. Even though he said he would help her, Kazuki feels he's going a bit too far with that story. Reflecting on her acting career, Kazuki remembers that at first she acted because she truly loved it. But gradually, acting became something that put pressure on her as people began to place high expectations on any new play she performed. Suddenly, a female role came her way. Since Kazuki can no longer fail in any play, this puts her under extreme pressure. Sensing she can't pull off the heroine role, Kazuki deduces the best option would be to drop out of the audition rather than risk failure. Suddenly, she notices he's shaking constantly and discovers he's afraid of heights, which, for her, makes him a failure again. She begins to envy him for always being able to handle his failures, unlike her. However, he reminds her that he's already used to failing, so it's not a problem for him. Furthermore, he makes it clear that failure is also important, as many people learn to love others' imperfections. But upon hearing this, Kazuki says it's just an excuse to make the incompetence less sad. And well, as they leave the Ferris wheel, he talks to Kazuki about the audition and says that if she ends up freezing up, she just needs to remember their date. However, she gets irritated and makes it clear that she won't depend on him, even during the audition. Meanwhile, Miwa and Nico continue to observe their every move. Miwa notices that Kazuki is connecting more and more with the boy, until suddenly she starts to bring her face closer to his, and then reveals that their accidental kiss was her first kiss. With that, she takes off her wig and goes back to acting like the prince. After all, their date ends there. My friends, things are going really well with the three sisters, and if you want the continuation, leave a like and subscribe and also comment below, and I'll bring it to you. I'm off.